Alright, so I just released the latest version of Vector Clock, and it's been quite a while since I worked on this, but I made quite a few new additions and changes and stuff. One of those was the complete reformatting of the user interface, and normally I'd go over all the new stuff that I added, but instead of doing that, I just wanted to go over this one new feature, which I think is totally cool, because I basically just discovered something that I didn't even think was possible with conventional HTML, or technically I guess this would be JavaScript. So the feature I'm talking about is, you notice how these buttons over here change color every time I hit random? So what this random button does is changes every single color of every single element. And then these buttons over here give you individual random control over each asset. But as you might have noticed, the background color and the button color are in sync, so that you can actually see sort of like the relationship between those two things, which was something I was trying to accomplish for quite a while, but I didn't know exactly how to do it, and honestly, the code initially to accomplish this seemed to be pretty sophisticated, and I wasn't really able to just like hammer it out. However, I found a way to do it that is much easier and doesn't require any sophisticated code. In fact, it's so elegant that it only requires an equal sign. Literally, that's it. So I'm going to show you how this works. Now over here is my source code, and this is the code for that button in particular. So this line of code establishes the button, and then it has an ID, which is face underline RC. So that identifies the asset, which is the circle SVG, which is the face. Sorry, I'm on the wrong button here. This is the face. So this is the button that I have selected. This is actually the background. But so face RC is the ID of the button that activates that asset. Now here's the code that is kind of magical in my mind. So this is the JavaScript on-click sort of thing. Well, that's built into the button, so I don't know, maybe that's HTML, not sure, but here's where it really gets cool. So you can have a function call. So this is actually first it's referencing the specific attribute that I'm trying to change, which is the fill of the face. And then this is the JavaScript function that I wrote for the random color, which I'll go over in a second, but that's kind of secondary. So the first thing that the button does is that it activates this function and substitutes the value returned by that function into the fill of the circle of the face. So that actually changes the color of the face. Now this is what's really cool about on-click in a button, is that you can just put a comma and then you can have it do an entirely additional action. And in this case, what I have is another reference to another asset in the application, which is face RC, which is actually the button itself. So this is a meta function. It's actually referencing its own style, specifically the background. And then this is where it just gets crazy, like totally mind-bendingly recursive. So it's taking the style of the face, which is this value right here, which has just been established when you, like, the second you push the button, and it's taking that and substituting it in for this attribute, which is the background color. So when you click the button, you're generating a random color, and then you're actually taking that random color and inserting it into the button at the same second you're pushing the button. So anyway, that's just like crazy meta code, but it totally works. Like, I didn't even think this was possible. I just kind of tried it because I was messing around with a few things, but it totally works. And so, like, normally you might have some incredibly complicated JavaScript function or whatever to create like a colored box that changes in sync with your random color, but instead you just need an equals sign. So I just found that kind of awesome. And as for the RC color, let me get up. So this is how that RC color works. This is a very straightforward random color generating function that I copied some of this off of a forum, and then I modified it slightly for my own purposes because I like to use RGB values instead of hexadecimal, just because they're easier for me to interpret visually. But yeah, so that was just the function I wanted to go over. Unfortunately I created this additional code right after I submitted, so the current version of Vector Clock doesn't have this enabled yet. These buttons are just gray. But yeah, anyway, I just thought that was so cool I had to share it. And so that pretty much ends the main section of the video. If you're still interested in seeing the changes that I made, just keep watching, and I'll go over those in a second. Alright, so I did completely arrayify the colors. So now, instead of having a individual pull down menu list for each color table, it's just one array now that's referenced, and that was actually a pretty easy thing to pull off. But this is really useful for me, because if I want to add another color, I can just slip it in here. And I added this. This is pretty cool. I'm really kind of proud of this too, because it's cutting edge. Let's see if I can find one of them in here. Okay, we have 3 colors that are totally custom defined. Like, these are traditional HTML color, like predefined colors. Here's one. So this is a not HTML, but a CSS variable, I think. It's either a CSS variable or an HTML variable. So that just looks weird, right? Because it's got all this like stuff in there that doesn't really make sense. Let me show you like how that works. First, let me create a random. And now the cool thing about this, I'll do charcoal first, is that in the previous version of Windows 10, this was not possible. So they just finally updated Edge with these variables. So these are like extra dark colors for backgrounds that aren't normally available in the HTML color name list. So those are defined up here at the top using these CSS variables. So yeah, they are CSS. So this is kind of cool. I can create custom colors and insert them into the color list, and then when I put those in the array, they are available to every single pull down menu, which is kind of cool, I think. It just saves me a lot of time programming and stuff. So okay, that was some of the back end additions. Style, right? So before there was like theme styles that you could select with buttons, and each style had its own button. I did the sort of the same thing that I did with the colors with the styles. So now if you want to change the styles, modern is the default, then you can just use these pull downs. I'll show you a more dramatic example here, like the The hand, I think, is probably the best example. So some of these are already available, but there's some new additions as well, like Gothic and Tech. And then I went and added new themes for the other assets. This one I think I'm going to remove because it's kind of ugly and useless just because the Roman numerals are so unbalanced. So probably going to axe that one in some future version, but added Gothic Roman numerals for AM and PM, which actually this is one of my has become one of my favorite like character sets for the clock, just because it looks so cool. Kind of anachronistic on a futuristic looking vector clock. And now for the like unit notifiers, there's this new tech scheme here, which is diamonds, and this kind of started out as an experiment with the absolute highest resolution that I could practically put in here, which is a 1 minute increments. And let me just turn this off so you can sort of see it flickering there in the background. It's this really subtle ring going all the way around here. Now if you were to zoom in like 50 times on that, you would actually see little diamonds for every single minute, and those are for like ultra high resolution displays. It's kind of cool because on the mobile device you can actually just zoom in to a specific area of the clock, like say you wanted just this area right here, and then you would see like an ultra fine grained view of that with the little 1 minute increments. But I noticed something really weird, and I think this is worth mentioning. Strangely enough, this is very costly in terms of CPU, and I think that's just because out of all the SVG assets, it's the most verbose. It's like several hundred lines to create all these objects, because obviously with one every minute, there's quite a few, probably thousands. And so turning that off actually reduces the CPU by about usage by about 10%. And since this is supposed to be ultra lightweight, it seemed kind of ludicrous to have such a high demand asset. Okay, so tech, yeah, the tech asset is added. Let's see what else. This only has one theme right now, so haven't really added anything more. And now this is probably my favorite addition out of the whole thing, and that's the unary theme for colors here, which is, as you can see, it's just like on the dice where you've got one dot for one number, and it's 1 to 12 using a unary matrix of circles, and I just think it's super cool. I mean, it just looks super cool. And let's see what else. I think that's it. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. This was in the patch notes, but I keep forgetting to actually mention it. And that's that I went back and retroactively modified some of these older themes to reflect sort of the new paradigm, which is that these are all layered on top of each other with the largest units on the top. So the reason that I did that is so if you turn off the larger units, the smaller units still remain. So if you want just 30-minute increments, or in this case 15-minute increments, they completely fill up the space, rather than just before it was like there were gaps in between where the overlaps were, because I only put as many as were needed. So that's kind of useful in certain circumstances, although it can also cause problems, I've noticed, if you have like a mixture of themes. And there's a way around this, but I honestly don't want to try to code. But you can see what's going on here. Basically, you have an overlap of the I mean, it's an obvious overlap of the modern hour marker over the 30-minute classic marker. So you get like this little sort of like thing going on underneath there, which is more and more obvious if you use certain schemes. And that, I don't really like that, but like the solution to fixing that is actually very complicated, and I feel like it's good enough that people have the ability to mix and match all the different themes without going overboard and creating like an incredibly complicated, like multiple SVG assets for each individual theme set that only respond to certain selections. So yeah, pretty much that's all that I have to report for this latest update. Everything is in the latest version on the Windows Store, except for the dynamic color syncing of these random buttons. This is one other thing I added, just as sort of like a bonus feature for people with really low power devices. You hit this light button and it takes you into the absolute like minimal resource version of the clock. So that would run on like anything, like on a, on like a little Raspberry Pi or whatever, like even an Arduino, probably, if you went to the trouble of transcoding and all that. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you found this kind of interesting. It's kind of esoteric, but whatever. I'm having fun with it. I pretty much only work on it on the weekends when I'm not working in the garden, so development is like abysmally slow, but it's changed quite a bit since I first started working on it. I mean, 22 versions, like 5 themes, and like a lot of cool new features. So yeah, check it out if you're interested, and thanks for watching.